Questions come in every day to automate your life from our subscribers, our fans, our patrons, and just general people who have found our videos. And today I'm going to start a brand new series where I walk through some of those questions that I think all of you really have. Hello automators, thanks for tuning in again. I'm Brian from Automate Your Life, and today I'm going to take the frustration out of automation by answering some very common smart home, home automation, and just general platform questions here. Now, I think we've all heard the term, there is no stupid question, and that is true. I think a lot of people will overlook asking questions because they feel like, oh, I should have got something on the video, but you know, most of these questions that we might look at as very basic, but the answers can be very complex. And so that's why I'm creating a video on it, because it's not always so easy in the comments to basically respond to you guys appropriately. First up is a question from one of our patrons, Big Mama SAS. Now, Big Mama SAS have been talking to me through Patreon, and that's one of the benefits of joining us there. And I want you guys to have this opportunity too. I answer those questions from those patrons first and foremost because they have contributed to the channel directly. So if you want to head over there, go ahead, join Patreon. The links are down below. This is a very common question that I get, and she was basically asking about setting her father up. I'm just going to read this. So she's trying to help him with some of his smart home setup, but it's in an apartment and he's struggling with the Wi-Fi in that space and just overall connectivity issues and interference. So basically she told me the Wi-Fi is really weak and really struggling. Could I use ZigBee in this space? The answer to this is extremely complex, and it's not just as simple as yes or no. In general, I would say yes, you can use ZigBee, and it's especially important to understand the Wi-Fi networks around your area. Now, another one of our patrons and one of our big supporters here, Matt Abrams, he actually tuned me into an application a little while ago that's really great for diagnosing Wi-Fi issues around your home, and then also telling you a little bit about how you can get your ZigBee working. Now, that application is called Wi-Fi Man, and it's by Ubiquiti, and you can go ahead and download that for free. Now, that application, once you go to the Channels tab, actually shows where you're standing, the different Wi-Fi networks, and basically the intensity or the strength of those networks around you. So you can go ahead and use that to see the intensity of both your network and the networks around you. Now, the other thing you will see is the different channels as they go. You know, generally routers use channel 1, 6, and 11 on the Wi-Fi 2.4 gigahertz band. And so when they use, say, number 11, you're very close to what is ZigBee channel 25. And that means basically that you can start to get a little bit of interference. So if you have a neighbor who is right next to you and is using channel 11 for their Wi-Fi, and then you go and you stick your ZigBee hub right next to their wall, you might start to run into a canceling interference here, and so ZigBee could be really difficult. Now, in general, what I'll tell you is I'm using channel 11 in my home. I'm using multiple ZigBee devices or ZigBee hubs, and they are all later into that channel 25. Samsung SmartThings uses channel 25 all the time, and so you don't really have to worry. In most cases, you're not going to see a lot of interference, but in those congested apartment settings, you could run into this, and so just that little bit of diagnosis will really go a long ways in understanding where you're at, and then you can look up how to change the channel on, say, a ZigBee device or your router. Actually, I should say, or your router too. Now let's talk about Samsung SmartThings. Let's move into that. That's less of a complex topic. And Tom asks a question, can I delete the old SmartThings Classic app because I'm getting dual notifications? Now that lots of you have installed the new app and you've been looking at potential migration or the possibility of being invited to do that migration, a lot of you are getting dual notifications through the smart home monitor. And what's happening there is the smart home monitor is actually a different app in Classic versus the new application. So you will get dual. They're both running simultaneously. They're not the same piece of code basically, and so you will get both. Now, can you delete that classic app? The quick answer is no. You need that there because when you go into that one day here, as we go through this whole migration process to the new application, you will end up getting a notification there to start the migration process. So you're not going to want to do that right yet. Now, I'm pretty terrible with names, so I'm just going to try this, but Akshat has asked me about the Globe integration with SmartThings, and this is really a question about the Tuya platform overall. So we heard a while ago that Tuya had integration with SmartThings, and actually while I was at CES, I got some great insight about that and how it's being prioritized. It's not necessarily the highest thing for the Tuya platform to get everybody on board, all of those products integrated, but this was very important clearly to Globe, who wanted to have their integration happen very soon. And so they actually went ahead, they created the integration, but it had to be retracted for a number of reasons. Now, you will see it come back, and maybe by the time this has been released, this video here. So this might be the perfect time for you to look at that right now as we're talking in this video, whether or not Globe is there to be added into SmartThings. One thing about that integration is the Tuya integration will be by vendor. So each vendor will have their own add. You'll go to add device and then you'll look up by vendor. So you would actually look for Globe in this case. Mario Vargas asks, do I need a Samsung SmartThings Hub in order to use the Smart Apps section of the SmartThings application? Now, this is kind of a funny one. The answer is both yes and no. And that's because lots of the code that they are using in those smart apps are actually installed directly onto your hub. Now, plenty of them are cloud-based, but there's not going to be a ton you're going to be able to do right now with the smart apps and just in general with SmartThings without a hub. You can add some devices. Some of these cloud-to-cloud integrations, you can go ahead and add those devices and start to use them. So while I could add things like the smart home monitor, I didn't really have any sensors to use with it. So again, it's yes and no. You can use a little bit, but you're not going to find a ton of functionality there without the hub. The last question I'm going to tackle this week about SmartThings before we move on is coming from Larry, and he asks if the new SmartThings app and its smart apps components appear to be moving toward local execution like Habitat. Now, I get a lot of questions about, when are you going to talk about Habitat? When are you going to talk about Habitat? It's local execution. Well, the fact is SmartThings is moving so quickly to local execution being all over their platform. So I'm not really looking to tell you guys all about Habitat, because if we hold a little bit here with SmartThings, then I don't think we need to transition for local execution of most of our smart home. The fact is, Samsung SmartThings and their adjustment to standard device handlers. So as you migrate from Classic to the new application, what you're going to find is that most of your devices convert. If you had a custom device handler, they're going to convert to a standard device handler. And once you have those standard device handlers, they will be installed locally on your hub. And that means lots of the automations, lots of the smart apps, and lots of what you want out of your smart home will be executed locally. Transitioning to a couple of questions about Amazon's voice assistant is actually one about Google and Amazon's voice assistant from Leo, who's been a long-time subscriber and a fellow Canadian. Now, Leo's asked me whether or not I see a real benefit to having both Amazon and Google's voice assistants in my home. Now, the quick answer is yes, they can provide a lot of different opportunities or a lot of different capabilities within your smart home right now. They do a lot of the same things in most cases for people. Lots of people use them for general information, and then they use them to play music in a lot of cases. But there's some specific situations that I think each one fits really really well. And the best example I used was actually my Fire TV setup with a home theater setup where I have a 2.1 speaker system connected to that Fire TV. And that's what I use Amazon for primarily in my smart home. I also use them for some of the email and the calendar capabilities because they are ahead of Google in that regard. I can sync more calendars, or I can at least sync more emails and get them from different providers, whereas Google, I'm kind of stuck with that Gmail. But on the flip side, I'm using the Nest Hub Max as my primary control device throughout my home, really, in a lot of cases, and that's situated in my kitchen. I use it to play videos on Chromecast throughout my home. I also use it to just get general information, and I really like that interface a lot better for hands-based control. The amount of times I get this question is I mean, it's out of hand, really. Now, this question came from Anthony, and he was asking about recent reliability of Amazon's voice assistant. And to be honest, I haven't noticed any changes in terms of overall reliability. I have a couple of sources on that, so I'll put one up on screen right now where you can kind of see how many people are having issues with Amazon's voice assistant, or at least reported issues. Now, lots of people don't report, but you can see general trends in the graphs from here. Now, the other thing that I would tell people when you're having a lot of trouble with voice assistants and just your smart home in general, especially smart home components that are based on cloud connections and Wi-Fi, is you're likely having an issue with your ISP or your router, and that's probably the most likely issue that you're having. Is your router or your mesh Wi-Fi system cannot maintain all of the different connections that are in your home, and so the reliability is actually being degraded because you're not able to get to those cloud services, or the timing's not right, and the handshakes and all of these different things that have to happen as you ask a question, the processing occurs, it goes out to the cloud, processing occurs there, and then it comes back, and it might have to go to other connected services and then come back to your network and have that all go on. Well, you have to maintain those connections really reliably with all of the devices then. And that's one of the reasons that I went out and I talked to Google and I got the Nest Wi-Fi, because I wanted to see how big of a change it was from what was honestly a great router that I had from Asus, and I showed you guys that. But what happened when I installed that in a system that is really made for the new world of IoT and the new smart home world, because each Nest Wi-Fi device is intended to handle 100 devices, or at least up to 100 devices. So what happened was I had 60 or 70 devices on a home Wi-Fi network, and suddenly I was losing connection, and it was on devices that were mostly Wi-Fi, and they had lower transceiver capability, or just lower strength basically within their Wi-Fi chip. And this meant that I could kind of see which ones had those weaker chips, and I could tell you guys about those another time. But then when I switched over, I could see the difference, and I think you will see the difference. And probably your Wi-Fi and your Ethernet setup is the thing that will change your reliability and your experience in your smart home the most. Now, here's a great question from JMac87Able, and this was his first comment, and I really love to see this. I want people to engage with me on this platform. That's the whole point, and that's why I'm putting out a video like this. So if you've never commented, go ahead, leave a comment below right now. Ask a question if you want to. Otherwise, just say hi and I'll say hi back. So what JMac was asking about, he's from Canada too, and he was asking, how did I get the calendar notification feature that I showed in a very recent Amazon Voice Assistant updates and features, our news video about Amazon's Voice Assistant? And the question was, how did I get that working in Canada, since it's not something that's available. So this is a hack that I use very similarly with Google, with Samsung, and with lots of companies actually. This works in a lot of different platforms. You basically pick the region or the locale for your account that will give you access to the most features. Now there's negatives to this, and what I've done with Amazon is I've actually went to, in my case it was amazon.ca, and I changed my account to a US address, and I changed the region, and that turned it into an American account. I've used this to install things like the Amazon Echo Auto and then changed it back, and it will continue to work. But you can also use this as a long-term setup with certain devices in your home, and that will give you access to all of these new features. And again, I do a very similar thing with Google's voice assistant. It's a little easier. You just basically change to English United States, and that works a lot of the time. This is a great question from Andrew, who asks, when Wi-Fi 6 comes out, what happens to all of your existing Echo products and really your smart home in general that are using Wi-Fi 5 or an older version of Wi-Fi? And the short answer is this won't change them at all, because almost every router, or actually every router and mesh Wi-Fi system that I've seen, has all of the older protocols. So 802.11bg,a,n,ac, which is kind of Wi-Fi 5 and soon to be the AX standard. Let's move into the Google side of things, and these are a couple of our oldest subscribers asking these questions. And actually, hang on. I don't mean that they're old. I mean that they've been around for a while. Now, Brad actually is one of our patrons, and he also came on a home tour here with us. And we're looking at setting up those home tours again to walk through and show you guys how the automators on Automate Your Life actually create the smart home that they have. Now, what Brad was asking was how with my Nest Hub Max, I managed to get little notifications to pop up as I looked at the screen. And what happens basically is in the morning especially, I see a ton of information. I see a ton of news updates. I see a lot of great stuff just come up on my Nest Hub Max. That's all related to the face match feature. And you need to do this on your Nest Hub Maxes, guys, because it is one of the most powerful components of that device. It will just bring up information for you at different times throughout the day, including your schedule, including your commute, and it just knows you, and it will display other information and music and videos that you would probably like to watch, since it knows you as a person using that device. Now, Dwayne has never officially allowed me to call him Shaft, but unfortunately that's his avatar. So today, Shaft was asking me about why I felt that in my comparison review of the Lenovo Smart Display and the Google Nest Hub Max, why Lenovo might not be able to keep up or get some of the newest features. And you know, the Google Nest Hub Max has a couple of features that we just talked about, face match, that I don't think is going to show up on the Lenovo. It could someday, but I really don't see that happening. It's kind of an advantage for Google, and I think they want to maintain that a little bit. So that's reason why. That's what Dwayne was asking is, sorry, that's what Shaft was asking me. And Shaft was saying, you know, why do you think that they're not going to get those features? So, you know, the 6.3 megapixel Nest cam on the Google Nest Hub Max versus the 5 megapixel cam on the Lenovo Smart Displays, that's really not a big difference, but I don't think you're going to see the movement in the camera and the face match showing up there. That's really good examples of things that I don't see coming. And this is number one. I don't think Lenovo can keep up. They're releasing a lot of different products right now. I think they will struggle keeping up with all of the updates, and we're already seeing it. I mean, they haven't caught up with face match. They haven't caught up with the movement of the camera. As you do a Google Duo video call, there's no movement in the Lenovo camera, and there is on that Google Nest Hub Max, and it creates a whole new experience. So I don't think Lenovo can do it. I don't think they're going to get a lot of help from Google in enabling those features. I think Google is keeping that as a bit of an example. And the third thing is, I'm not sure the hardware on the Lenovo Smart Display is is the same level. Actually, I am sure it's not the same level. It has slowed down considerably over time, and I'm not sure it can handle all of the new and upcoming features that we will see out of those Nest Hub Maxes. This is a great question from Guy or Guy, I'm not sure here, but he was asking why Google Keep and not the actual to-do list was used in my video. Well, the thing is actually that it was. The to-do list is very much still there, and so is the shopping list. Those Google Assistant lists, and that's what they're called now, Google Assistant lists will remain there, and I think for a long time, because Google won't remove them until enough people have stopped using those specific lists. But you can now go and create Google Keep lists, which a lot of people use. They use Google Keep for lists and notes, and that note integration will come as well, by the way, guys. But Google Keep is just basically, I think, something that a lot of people want to use. I think it's a great application, and so that's why I was using it there. You could still use the existing to-do list. You just have to watch us over time. If I start to tell you, hey, that list is going to go away, you might want to move over to another integrated service. Solid Hacker asks if we're going to get a new Chromecast this year, and my short and sweet answer to this is I don't believe so. They don't need it. The version 2s and 3s still work perfectly. Version 1 even just stopped getting the full gambit of updates, and there's just really no reason to it, in my opinion. Finally, one of the biggest questions I'm getting from people is, where's the Nest migration at? Where is the Works with Nest program at? And when am I getting access to create things like smart home automation and routines within Google's platform? And the short answer is there's no change. Google's not talking about anything. They're not telling me about anything, and my other sources haven't seen anything themselves. So I'm not getting a lot of information right now that suggests they're moving very quickly. And something that even tweaked me recently is we went and installed Nest Wi-Fi thermostat, the 3rd generation device at Madeline's house, who's still working on the channel. You guys talk to her all the time. You just don't happen to know that. But you know, when we did that installation, her old Nest account did not have to get migrated. And this was something that I had expected with something like a Nest thermostat at this point. And we even had to reinstall her Nest Protect during this period because it had just been left for a bit. And it did not cause us to migrate her account to a Google account. So it was a bit strange there, and I had expected by this time period for that to happen. So right now, as far as I know, guys, nothing is moving on that Works with Nest, at least not in the foreground. We know they're working on it in the background, and we know they've promised within the first half of 2020 to give us something totally different and to start giving us access to automation and the ability to integrate those Nest products direct into the Google Home application. So I hope you guys enjoyed this new series. I know this was a long first one, but I hope this was really worth it to you. You should have learned just a ton here, and you can see I'm being pretty off the cuff here with most of my responses, so I'm trying to answer them as I would every day in the comment section, which means it is your turn now to leave questions down below, to ask me questions, and we will put lots of these on our next video that we do of this. And if you guys are looking for more resources, community.automatelife.net is a great community of automators that have already joined us there. I don't answer every question there, but there are people who know more than I do about lots of topics on those forums, and where I will start to pull some of the questions for this from as well. Of course, go ahead to Patreon, join us there. Thank you to my existing patrons, and I hope you're happy that you ended up on this video. Now, otherwise, guys, thanks for watching, and of course, don't hate, automate.